Dan Levine.
Mark Schulein.
Welcome.
How's it going, buddy?
Good, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Super stoked you're here. I appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you. Yeah.
We were just commenting offline that we look oddly like brothers or cousins here.
Yeah, we have matching grays and browns.
How has that happened? I don't know.
It's genetics.
Well, it's funny. What's cool is, and just jumping right in, we go back a minute. It's super fun that we've been friends for a long time. That's not while you're here or why you're here, but there's some fun connections over the fact that we've been friends. And it all started, I think, with what's interesting is my oldest son and your youngest son have been very, very good friends, best friends since they were little.
Best friends since they were little.
And what's happening with them this year?
So this year they're graduating.
College.
Big deal for
Crazy.
them. College.
So
they've left the nest, but now they're really leaving the nest.
Hopefully. Unless they come back to the nest for a while, like so
Which
many
they're likely going to do. So we're prepped for that.
You mean you haven't turned his bedroom into the gym yet?
No, they'll still be useless when they come back. So
we love those useless kids. No, it's really been cool to watch them grow up. I mean, and your son Jake was a little guy. Now he's way taller than me. His voice is like this deep, the deepest voice I've ever heard.
He has a voice for radio.
He does for sure.
Yeah.
But he has a face for TV. Both those kids do. We have a face for radio.
We have faces for radio. I want to stay away from that camera.
For sure. Well, listen, Dan, what's cool? So our wives are good friends. We've been friends. The boys are friends. Great friend groups watching those kids grow up. Like really cool. Those boys will be friends forever, which is rad. And what they're doing and how they're going about it was really neat. But the reason that you're here is not that. The podcast is always about talking to really cool people that do good things in the world and the storytelling. And with you, even though we go way back, there's a lot that I don't know that I'm super excited to both learn and to share because the story's really neat. And the punchline is what you're doing today is really, really cool. And that's what the hat you're wearing and actually the shirt that I'm wearing, which
I appreciate.
Hey, this is a legit. This came right out of
very thoughtful of you to run that.
It came right out of the closet because we were at an event together. But Waterman, or Original Waterman, is your brand. And the way you got to it is what's really interesting, and what you're doing with it is the part I really am excited to dig into because what Waterman, in a nutshell, what does Waterman do? And that'll set the stage for the rest of the conversation.
Oh yeah, we can go into that.
And we will.
And that bar is pretty high, cool, interesting. So I'm not sure if I'm going to clear it, but we'll try. So Waterman is a lifeguard outfitter, and it was founded by Ken and Jen Miller, who were Oceanside Lifeguards, Ocean State Beach Lifeguards. And then Ken went on to be a firefighter up in Half Moon Bay and a swim rescue instructor. Right. And they are both water people through and through and through. If they had gills, I wouldn't be surprised. And they built what we think is the gold standard for lifeguard uniform supply in the United States, which means we aim to make every shift better for the men and women that are in the tower, whether they're in open water or on the pool deck. And
awesome.
It's been a long path for me personally getting to Waterman, but it has been a fun path. I mean, I look back at my career and I look forward to my career, and every minute has been enjoyable. So, and I think you would say the same thing too about your career as well.
Most moments, certainly not all.
Well, we pave over the ones that don't that aren't up to snuff, but we just keep moving forward.
But it's like so many things. I wouldn't trade anything, and we're going to talk about. Thank you for sharing that because I'm really excited to dig into it because it's connected both of us in a different way than we had been before.
Yep.
And I don't want to jump too far ahead into that, but it's really cool because of my work with the Ben Carlson Foundation and with the Hawaii Lifeguard Association, and you're working with those same organizations as in support, which is just really cool how it's dovetailed. So we'll get there. But you mentioned your career along the path, which has been rad. I mean, your career has touched some of the biggest, call it outdoor living, action sport, surf brands in a leadership role for all of them that has brought you to Waterman. And I want to dig into all of that. So, we're going to go into this is your life, Dan Levine, in that you've ended up here. We're in the Newport Beach, Costa Mesa area. You've lived out here for a very long time in California, but you didn't grow up here. And you didn't grow up in what would be, I think, considered like the mecca of the industry that you've worked in your whole career.
I grew up in the anti-mecca. So whatever would be contrarian to growing up with respect to coming to, I think, the epicenter of surf, although probably the Australians would debate that. and maybe some of the Europeans as well. But yes, I grew up in the anti-surf mecca,
Which is where?
which is a suburb of northeastern New Jersey called Englewood, New Jersey.
Englewood, New Jersey.
Englewood, New Jersey.
So you've come about as far as you can
Yeah.
in the U.S., continental U.S. as you can.
Yes, and it was part of a long-range strategic plan that I put in place when I think I was around 11 or 12 years old.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to dig into that.
Yeah.
But let's start a little further back. Tell us about growing up in Jersey, and then I want to figure out why that was formative into the decisions you made to have a long-term strategic plan at 11 to move west.
Yeah.
And then end up in a career that put you in the very top of that world of action sports, surf, et cetera, and has brought you into supporting the lifeguard world. I mean, it couldn't be more interesting and really cool to end up if that was your passion or your view at the time, but
Yeah.
I don't know why. So let's talk about Englewood, New Jersey, family. What was growing up like there in that world?
Yeah, so that's a good point. Like you kind of look at your life and was it nature or nurture, and how did you get to where you wound up? And I think I was a combination of nature and nurture, but the nurture was like a swift kick in the ass from my parents because I was under pressure, which they would probably disagree with and say, oh, you were in a low pressure environment. And I feel like I was in a very high pressure environment with Ellen and Richard Levine. So dad was a doctor and OBGYN, and for him, his patients came first, which we all agreed to as a family. And when he was home, he was attentive, but he was delivering babies and taking care of all of his patients. And then mom was a stone cold killer. So she was the editor-in-chief of Good Housekeeping magazine, the first female editor-in-chief of Good Housekeeping magazine, which is wild to think about. And she grew up as someone who felt very strongly about her readers. And I think that probably was what formed my career. You know, this was someone who I would come home and she would have the magazine or the Perspective magazine covers taped all over our kitchen with different font types and different colors and different layouts and the headlines, et cetera. And she would put me to task and we would walk through it together, and she would want me to edit and curate what I thought would resonate the most with her consumer, which of course, like I was absolutely the wrong consumer, period.
You're
but
a little male.
I was very
catering
male
to-
and very young, right?
Catering to, successful women.
You know, I think my memory of her asking me probably goes back to 7 or 8 years old, and then it was nonstop. And so always being asked for a point of view, and to have a strong point of view, and I don't know and I don't care didn't suffice, right? Made it, I think, part of my personality trait, I guess, sort of. So growing up in Englewood was sort of Leroy Neiman-ish, like you were in a suburb and we went out and we did everything kids did back then, rock fights, playing in the woods and running around, and at some point, getting in trouble and not getting in trouble and coming back when it was dark out for dinner. So it was, I think, maybe what a lot of kids don't do anymore today.
Yeah. Although our kids got in a little bit of trouble together.
They got in a fair bit of trouble together. Yeah, they certainly
Rightly
did.
so.
Yeah.
They've turned out all right. Listen, just the one phrase there, and I know enough about your family history just to get a little extra chuckle out of it, but I don't think you were kidding when you said mom was a stone cold killer. She was, I mean, to make it in the world that she was in, as you said, the first editor at Good Housekeeping, the first female, was she working in New York or was that based in Jersey?
Yeah, no, she worked in New York. So she started as a reporter for a regional newspaper called the Bergen Record in New Jersey. It serviced northeastern or northern New Jersey. And then she went to work for Cosmopolitan magazine as a junior editor, and was taken under the wing of this icon, a woman named Helen Gurley Brown, who was the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan. And she was mentored, coached, and pushed by Helen, and then was given the keys to start a quarterly magazine called Cosmopolitan Living. And then, I don't quite remember the order, but she ran Woman's Day and Red Book magazine, and then eventually Good Housekeeping, and then eventually was editorial director for all Hearst magazines.
Wow. And
Yeah.
we're talking 70s, 80s,
70s, 80s, 90s, aughts, and then
like a good, well-spoken Australian right there.
yeah, aughts, right? I don't know, like OOs.
Early
like,
2000s.
I feel like you say the OOs, you get cross-eyed. You say the aughts, your people are like,
Cross-eyed.
right? Cross-eyed, right? So so she was never not working, but she also was never not working at being a mom. So she really sort of threaded the needle between being a very intense professional, but then also taking care of my brother and me.
But her peers were some of the most like she was a significant player in New York in the publication world at that time, right?
Yeah, I mean her opinion was sought after, and she had a very strong point of view, and she had an unapologetic point of view, and she was adamant about ensuring that women who were coming up through publishing, regardless of the magazine that they worked for or the company that they worked for, were presented with the exact same opportunities that their male peers and colleagues were presented with. And she was tough. She was not to be trifled with.
Okay. How did that play out as mom?
Oh, it was brutal. So, how it played out was basically you perform with excellence only. You are always in your biggest gear and performing at that level. And my brother and I were constantly, and I think I've shared this with Kathleen and the boys, it's like we were always quizzed at the dinner table. So dinners weren't light affairs where, any dinner, by the way, so this would just be assuming that they were home for dinner, because a lot of time they weren't home for dinner. They would sit my brother and I down, and they would rip through current events, and we were expected to know what was going on regionally and nationally in politics.
So it was on. If mom and dad are home, dinner's on.
It was always on, and so if I wasn't in the house, that was the outlet for being basically pressed intellectually. So
you had to prepare. Like going to school, you had to prepare for dinner because it was going to be on.
You had to prepare, and then my friends also. So the reputation of our house is like if you're sitting down with Ellen Levine, you better bring up a point of view, and
at 9 years old.
You better know not only who your congressman is, but also who your state legislatures are for New Jersey.
But that's amazing.
Yeah.
So what impact? I mean, you mentioned some of it, and you as I think most people that would know you based on your career that we'll talk about, like you were I don't know if they would call you a stone cold killer, but I bet some people would. But I think, let me turn it into a question: how much of mom or dad's personalities and leadership traits and how they saw the world and how they pursued excellence has trickled into the veins of Dan Levine?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think both. I think I got the best of both with mom and dad, right? So dad is an OBGYN, right? You have to be a technician. You have to be always switched on to developments in medical technology and procedures. So I felt like Dad was always training, and he also was a professor at Columbia. So he was not only in a private practice, but he was also a teaching doctor. And so he stayed on top of what was going on. He didn't just rest on his laurels. And then he wasn't a lazy doctor. And maybe there aren't lazy doctors, but I think he was always compelled to ensure that his patients were getting the best care possible. And then with mom, there was this intensity on delivering results and just ensuring that what you are working on has 100% of your attention and your capacity, because that impacts everyone around you, right? And so you want to be that team player, that leader. And I think that they imparted that on me. Collectively, they both, I don't think they would have used this word, but I think that they were so customer service oriented. And what I mean by that is that for dad, his patients came first. And for mom, her readers came first. And And so they were always, and again, I don't think servant leadership wasn't.
That concept didn't really exist.
No, it wasn't a buzzword back then, right? There wasn't a book about it, and there certainly wasn't like a class at Harvard Business School or Stanford.
Well,
or
no,
anything.
and back
right.
at that time, you're talking like the GE Jack Welch approach was very common, which
Right,
is
like
cut off your bottom.
cut 10%, cut 10%. Yeah.
So mom was a stone cold killer. I love that quote, but she was actually relentless in her expectations and execution. But when it came to people, she was super conscientious about the end result and the impact. Is that
quality, right? And basically, if you're printing a magazine every month, it's about retention and engagement. Again, words that weren't used back then, right? But it was engage, retain, convert, right? And bring new readers, bring new eyeballs in, and that's what she cared about.
Hold on, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
At the same time, what you just said could be applied to your business tract as well.
All day long.
When it comes to retail or selling to consumers,
Yeah.
it's not different than everything you just described, right? To some degree.
No, it's not. I mean, I think those are sort of the building blocks for any brand or business, certainly for your business, is that it's a reflection of your culture and it's a reflection of what you stand for. And you're always engaging, and you need to be converting, and you need to be retaining your legacy customers, and particularly your early adopters that have stuck with the brand, and you got to cherish them. And then you got to go for conversion of new customers all day, every day. Like it's relentless,
100%.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And really that could be applied to any business or a podcast or anything, a magazine or a gynecologist, or OBGYN, like all of those things, it resonates. Super interesting. And again, when we get to you and your career, everything you just said about how your parents viewed the world is, I think, how people would say, oh, that's how Dan looks at everything that he's done. Super high expectation. And sometimes high expectations rub people the wrong way. Like, I just want to cruise, Dan's hammering or Mark's pushing, but that's how you get to world-class performance, right?
Yeah, I think also you need to be comfortable with who you are, right? So too boring, too serious, whatever. But if it's a win for the business and then you've got a team that's winning alongside you, then okay, you take those flaws if you're ensuring that your consumer and what you're doing is winning, because if your team is winning, they feel really good. If your team is developing, they feel really good. And you got to be the best version of yourself and be that unapologetically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like you grew up with a very good balance of IQ, because I know you're IQ, but also EQ. Like what you're saying, I don't think that you can run a super successful anything without having a balance of both. You have to be smart and competent and determined, but you also have to have the human factor and the ability to influence others and lead others well. And I think that it sounds like you got a good balance of that, or you have a good balance of that, some of which probably trickled down from mom and dad.
Yeah, certainly. So going back to that, going back to mom, like one of the things that that she would do is that whenever we were in supermarkets or magazine newsstands, because back then there were magazine newsstands,
sure.
right? For anyone who's listening to this that
What's that?
doesn't recognize that there were actually newsstands that sold magazines.
Back to the aughts in the 90s?
Yeah, back to the 80s, and the aughts. I think maybe they still exist in the aughts.
Really.
We would, whenever we were shopping for groceries or running errands, if there was a newsstand or a supermarket, she would grab us, pull us in, and go look to see where her magazine was placed, and then where her sister publications from Hearst or from any other publishing company she was working for, where those were placed.
Or the competition, I would imagine.
And the competition. And the Stone Cold Killer would reposition her magazines across the entire supermarket so that she was front and center.
Wow.
And that at the cash wrap you saw her. And if they were out of stock or anything was missing, she would talk to the manager and she would find out and she would bring it back.
So rad.
Yeah. You had to learn to not be, it was like, oh man, I'm embarrassed. And then you're like, okay, no, this is just mom. Yeah.
I love that. Tenacious, but also I love the equality side of it, that she saw that so early. Maybe not so early, but that it was a passionate play for her to make sure that everybody was treated equal, women as well. And
it's interesting because she's not an athlete, like the anti-athlete, but she was as competitive as any athlete, right? So her athleticism was with her career. And probably, I guess, with my brother. I mean, I know she had great pride as a mom. So
got it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you for saying that. I feel like I could ask questions about your folks all day long because I knew enough just to know, but I hadn't gotten much of this depth over time. So thanks.
Yeah, look, we can keep deflecting about me and just
No,
focus on my parents.
well,
That'd be great.
It's all formative.
That's
It
all
is
good.
all formative. It is all part of the puzzle, which is really fun as we get into your career and your stuff and Waterman. Listen, I know that you lost both your folks in the last couple of years, and that's probably very tough because I know that they were very engaged as grandparents. You were still very, very close to them, even though they were in New York. So sorry for your loss. How has that been? That's been a tough road, I would have to imagine.
Yeah, you know, when you think about death and losing parents, you kind of put it into a file in your head and you compartmentalize it, right? And when they're alive, you're like, okay, they're going to live forever, and then they start to ail, and then their mortality is exposed, right? So Dad was traumatic. So he died in a bike accident. It was sudden. It was from a traumatic brain injury, and that just caught us out. I could get into why I think that might have been a blessing to just, he was at the peak of his life, and then he wasn't. And, I miss him. He was my best friend. And, no one wants to get a phone call from a sheriff in Dutchess County, New York. But he was doing what he loved. And then my mom was robbed of her intellect by Alzheimer's. And if anyone is listening to this and has a family member that's gone through that, we all know that it is torture. I mean, it is just the slowest moving disease that is brutally unfair. And so that was tough. And what I had to do was hold on to the good memories of Mom, because Alzheimer's can really pave over those, because you start to only remember the version of your parent or loved one that has the disease. But thank you. And we're still sort of dealing with it. But and it was bang bang, one after another within 2 years of each other. So.
Yeah. Oh, sorry for that, buddy. Not really, but I love, even just how you mentioned that, like, don't let it pave over all the good memories and all the influence.
But also you got to fight for those and hold on to them. It's really tough.
Gnarly. Well, listen, let's go back a little bit in the Wayback Machine. At the time, you're living in Jersey, being influenced by Mom and Dad at the dinner table and everything that they do in their life, even going to the grocery store and watching Dad take off to go help a patient or deliver a baby. What were you doing other than, throwing rocks? And are you playing sports?
Yeah.
What are you doing at school?
It's interesting you say rocks, because rock fights were a thing in the 70s, right? Like dodgeball, but with rocks.
We used to get hurt.
Yeah, rocks are not soft. I would come back and my mom would say,
Yeah.
"Why do you have that shiner on your eye?" Like, I don't know, Mom.
Yeah, Jeff threw a rock at me.
Yeah. So I was playing sports, and I was playing, very typical East Coast kind of preppy sports. I played soccer, I played lacrosse, and I did some light ski racing, which I wouldn't hang my hat on. But certainly for me, the two sports that I loved were soccer and lacrosse.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, one of those trickled down to your youngest son, right?
One of them did, yeah. And so,
Jake was a big...
Yeah, unlike what we grew up with as kids, Jake was a single sport athlete.
Yeah.
And so to a degree, he didn't get to experience, I think, what Gen X and certainly other generations did, where you're a multi-sport athlete. But maybe not for everyone, but it seemed like for Jake, it was a good fit.
Yeah, it seemed like it. It comes up often here because I have a lot of athletes and coaches and et cetera, but like the multi-sport versus single sport thing comes up all the time. Like, I think we were blessed to grow up playing multi-sport, and today you have to fight for the ability to do that. And oftentimes you have to be so good that you can tell the coach, I'm playing more than one. And if you're good enough, they'll say, okay, Jake. But if you're not, they're like, no, you're playing once. Like, I think it's a big.
There's like a punitive process of, if you choose to do two, you're not going to be able to do one.
And high burnout factor. Okay. Yep. And then school. Did you go to boarding school?
No, I did go to a private high school.
Okay.
And so it was
That's
a day school, which, was called a prep school. But I went to a day school and then went to college up in Boston and Tufts University.
Okay. So we're going to college.
Yeah.
So Tufts, Massachusetts, was that a goal? Like when you were in high school,
Yeah.
you were looking at college. I'm sure with your parents, you didn't have a choice. Was there an expectation of what you would do? Is this like the Jewish, with like the dad's a doctor, were you going to be a doctor and attorney? Or were they more open to like, what do you want to do? Where are you going to go? Like, what was the thought process at that time?
You know, you would have thought that based on kind of how I was painting my parents, who were wonderful, and that there was pressure to, you particularly in a Jewish family, you're going to be a doctor, because that was my dad went through that. So basically,
with
I think,
his family.
yeah, when he was born, I think my grandma Vivi, probably said you're going to be a doctor, every day until he was accepted into med school. So, but from my parents, there was no pressure whatsoever. It was kind of like, you'll figure it out, do whatever you want, go wherever you want, as long as it's not California. and I did apply to schools.
So
in California.
you came out here despite them.
I wasn't, thinking back on it, I wasn't brave enough to make the commitment to a West Coast school in what I guess was 1987. And I could have, and that would have gotten me out here 4 or 5 years earlier. But they didn't care, and quite frankly, look, the college process is such
different now too.
It's right. It is different, but it's as broken as it ever was been, and that's probably a whole other podcast. It is almost impossible to find the perfect alignment in such a short period of time. Trying to find the place you want to be for the next 4 years. So I wound up in Tufts, which is right outside of Boston, in Medford and
That's
Somerville.
no small feat. I mean, that's a hell of a school.
It was a hell of a school back then, but like most of us, probably when we look at where our kids are going, it's way harder to get into school now than it was back then.
I know. But that doesn't mean it's any better. It's just gotten more harder based on state politics and money and everything else.
And also the general application for him.
Yeah.
But so I had a great 4 years at Tufts, and I certainly majored in nothing that had anything to do with
What was your major? I have no idea.
So my major, what I loved was art history, right? Which I don't know what practical application. It has some practical application. Maybe you learn a little bit of logical reasoning and understand sociopolitical and economic perspective
of the Renaissance.
Right. But really, it has no practical application whatsoever. And I was like, okay, well, I'll complement that, and I'll double major in political science, something that also has equally zero application unless you're going to DC or something like that. So I chose the most liberal arts majors that you could select.
Except what Mark Schuline picked, which was marine science and art. Those are my double majors.
Well, so good for you. I mean, so if you art as a doer, I couldn't be art as a doer. I could be art as an editor and a curator, but not as a doer. And then at least you had like a practical technical field.
Dan, there's a reason I'm not an artist or a marine biologist or a marine scientist. I enjoyed them. Similar. I loved college. I worked really hard. I did well. And I used some of the skill I developed, but I mean, I obviously didn't pursue those because I realized, maybe like you, okay, if I'm gonna have to go get my PhD and I'm gonna be a lab nerd, like it just wasn't for me. I really loved school. I loved learning. It taught me a lot about the skill of studying and preparation and everything else. But yeah, I run hardware stores now.
Yeah. Well,
I can appreciate the path. It was very similar. I didn't realize that.
There's a lot of detail work in running. Yeah, I mean, retail operation is the toughest thing in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, every day is a problem. Every hour there's some sort of challenge, right?
For sure. Especially on really rainy days when you have roofs leaking and all that stuff like today. But let me ask you, so those were your degrees. Did you have a magic wand of like, this is what I want to do after college? This is where I want to be? Like, what you were working on those degrees, but did you have like a path that you saw yourself on?
Yeah. So I always worked in college. So I always made sure that I had some hourly job. And when I look back in high school, I started making clothes to sell in high school. So boxer shorts, because back then that was super trendy, and then T-shirts and other hooded sweatshirts in college. But then also I was working hourly jobs. And I think that I always was interested in what what someone responded to positively. Like, are you going to buy this, right? Am I making connection with you visually? I don't think I was putting in those terms back then, but I was like, okay, I think I know what you want. I'm going to make something that I like, that you will want, and therefore the win for me is I'll make money, a little bit pocket change, and it's a win, right? So there's sort of like a athlete's gratitude of I won, right? I found something that you like and that I created.
This is all new to me. When did that start? In high school? Is that what you said? You were making
It
clothes
started. Man, I still have a pair of boxer shorts that I did with our school logo and our school mascot, which was an English bulldog. So it's the Dwight Englewood Bulldogs, and it was an out and out runaway failure.
But
it was. I learned from my mistake.
But were you actually sewing them and doing the patterns and all of it?
No, found a manufacturer, and so basically, back then, right, you wore your boxer shorts hanging out of your lacrosse shorts, so that was a thing, right? I think
on the East Coast.
On the East Coast, right? So the thing now is like you run your pants lower than your waistbands, but back then you ran the bottom of your boxer shorts lower than your uniform shorts. So,
I don't know if that trend ever hit California. I'm not
sure. For good reason, for really good reason. But it was definitely like a preppy thing, or at least in my opinion, it was a preppy thing. And so I went in and said, all right, I'm going to order 144 shorts, and I'm going to sell it to my teammates into my high school, because we were 7 through 12, and had this great vision and got great graphics and did the screen printing, and then found a supplier, and then made a big mistake. And that was, I didn't check to see what they were going to actually use as the blank, right? And so they created a boxer blank that wasn't what I wanted, but I had to take it because I signed off on it. And so of the 144, I think I probably had 72 left.
You still have a box in the garage?
You know, it is the mistakes in life that I think push you to the successes.
Well,
right?
hold on. But how much? I mean, jump
I was
way ahead.
crushed when that came in.
But how?
Crushed.
When we get into the list of companies that you've worked for,
Yeah.
how many times has that very first learning influenced your thought processes and how you've pursued things, and what you like? It's
always,
invaluable,
it's
right?
tattooed. Yeah, I mean, it just becomes indelible. You know, it haunts you. I mean, I'm talking about something that happened in 1983 or 84 that haunts me to this day, and I still have a pair of those in my underwear drawer as a reminder.
Don't ever wear these. Don't ever like.
I just look and go,
It's so-
God, how did I make that mistake? It could have been so good. But then I continued doing that in college, to a lesser degree, but would do T-shirts and stuff. And then my first career out of Tufts had absolutely zero to do with what I'm doing today, because I thought I was going to be in the art world, and I loved modern art and avant-garde art, which, you know, I don't mean that like in some like crazy arrogant fashion, but in the same way you'd like music, I loved art. And I got a job in Soho at a gallery called the Stux Gallery. And so that was 1991, right when I graduated, and I was super proud of it. You know, it was like whatever minimum wage was, must have been, I don't know, I was living in New York City making $7.20 an hour, $5.75 an hour. I don't know. I think my annual salary was $17,000. And then I realized it's not what I want to do. It's much more fun to buy art than it is to sell art. And so I was the registrar in the gallery, so hanging shows and shipping art and shooting. This was before the days of digital imagery. I was shooting 4x5s, transparencies. And then I was like, you know, I love apparel and fashion, or basic lifestyle fashion, and started interviewing with Polo Ralph Lauren and J. Crew and Macy's and Gap. And that was what kind of got me into my career today.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was that. I did not know anything about that whole art side of things, nor did I would have guessed, based on what I know of you, which we'll get into, I would have guessed with your business savvy and your experience and your when we've talked many times offline, like your skill with the numbers in business and the finance and economics is impressive, beyond impressive. I always thought that you had a business degree of some sort, or even MBA, et cetera. Like, it's super interesting to see, like, you don't need to have those degrees to still have success.
My parents were very anti-graduate degree.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, particularly for MBAs. I mean, not like if you're going to go get a law degree, which they would consider like a professional degree or an MD, but MBA, my mom would absolutely just excoriate MBAs. And
it's so funny.
Yeah, I know. Looking back on it, I was like, oh, man, I think I would have enjoyed the right MBA program.
Yeah, it's not too late.
Yeah, I know it's probably rather teach than
like
go back to school.
Right? You have your PhD
exactly.
at this point. Right?
And it's also like 2 more years where you kick the can down the road and you don't have to work. So that could have been fun.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, very interesting. And there's also something else. It's a side story, but it's an interesting one. And this ties back into your skill with numbers. I think I remember this from your son, Jake. Do you see numbers differently?
Yeah, I categorize some numbers and letters by color.
And I think, does Jake as well?
I don't know if Jake does.
I thought he did.
I think Jake just sees things in color.
And Jake's got a very creative mind.
Both your boys. I sit in the shadows of their creativity. They really have a gift with creativity that they got from their mom, and I think also from my mom, but certainly from Kathleen. And they definitely outgun me on the creativity side.
Got it. Yeah, they're great kids.
Yeah.
Well done. So the numbers thing, I don't know if you had told me or they had told me or your wife, whatever, but like I found it super interesting. And at some point I had looked it up and there's a name for that, right? It's like...
Yeah, I can't remember what the name is.
Like synesthesia or something like that?
I think it's synesthesia, but I would say that I'm on the low side spectrum of synesthesia. I started seeing letters and colors and just categorizing it like that.
I don't think I'd ever heard of it until I heard it from, again, whoever it was in your circle, but I was like, what?
Yeah.
I see them as like black holes. X's and O's. That's
I mean, what you don't want to see is numbers as red, right?
No, but for sure.
I mean, B is red. Like I can only see the letter B in red.
So interesting. Wow.
C is blue.
I don't know if anybody's heard that, but it's so interesting.
Yeah, so
wow.
Anyway,
got it.
Yeah. So
rad. And then, so you were just talking about how you started to interview with the clothing companies. Where did that go?
Well, that went well, which I probably didn't think it was going to go well. So I was interviewing, and the opportunities were sort of similar. Back then, before Macy's became the dumpster fire that it is right now, they were a world-class department store. And so they had the best training program. So I was interviewing there, and that was quite an interviewing process. And then Gap, which had a merchandising training program. Ralph Lauren was a little more informal, and then J. Crew also was a little more informal. And then 3 of the 4 would have been in New York, and Gap was California. And so after a long interview process, which included flying out to San Francisco, I got an offer. And I remember, I think I jumped on the table at the art gallery. And by the way, the art gallery supported me. They were amazing. And when you get a call in 1992 that we're going to move you to California, by the way, we'll cover all of that, and your salary is going to be $28,000. Again, remember, I was making 17, and I knew the cost of living in San Francisco back then was way lower. I thought it was like I was a rich man with $28K, and they were moving me out. So I took that job, and it got me to California, which goes back to 11 or 12 years old of saying, I'm going to get there. I just don't know when I'm going to get there, but I'm going to get there.
Why? And going back to that, I forgot to touch on it. What was why was that important to you, or a draw at 11? This
is going to sound a little bit cheesy. True story though. So a lot of East Coasters, we go to summer camp. And what summer camp is that you're kicked out of the house for 2 months. And so basically I think it's your parents get a reprieve. And it's a little bit like Lord of the Flies. You go away to summer camp, you have counselors, it's sleepaway. And if you don't have pointy elbows and a thick skin, you're not going to survive in summer camp. It's not for the faint of heart. I loved it. And a surfer magazine. This is true story. Could have been surfing, but I think it was Surfer. Someone had a surfer magazine. It was probably one of my counselors in the cabin. And it was like a ray of light shone down on me, and there was, Care Bears and rainbows and like a choir. And I was like, that's where I want to be and what I want to be doing, right? I want to get out to California. And then I was like, damn my parents for living in a northeastern New Jersey suburb, which couldn't be more anti-California or more anti-surf. And I don't even think my parents had ever seen surfing, but they did love the beach. So that was what I was after. I was after a California lifestyle.
Right. I don't know if I know you know Scott Richards, Slightly Choppy and Quicksilver.
I mean,
same story. He grew up, I think, Montauk, New York. He grew up surfing over there, but Scott's been in the studio. Again, similar background, art, and
I mean, like, you want to talk about creativity. I mean,
incredible
my gosh,
guy,
and like an aesthetic.
Yep.
I got to work with him at Stan's. I mean,
I forgot he was at Stan's too.
He was
such
fantastic.
A good dude. Such a good dude.
And
then John Wadsworth, who lives here, an incredible athlete and waterman and surfer, but he grew up in New York as well. And made his way and now lives down by the Wedge.
With a water family also.
Water family,
right?
big time water family. And he's big in
the
Surf Rider Foundation. He also has been in here. So cool. I didn't realize that about you, but it makes a lot of sense. So you take the job.
I take the job. I moved to San Francisco. And I had one friend, a buddy of mine, Mike McGee, and he was working in finance. And Mike let me crash on his futon while I was looking for a place. And so he was also working finance hours, so he had to be at the office, I think, at 4:30 in the morning, right, or something like that, because
he was dealing with New York.
And so he'd leave, then I go to work, and was jumped straight into the Gap environment, which was a boiling cauldron of water. So
how so? Just give us a high level on that.
Yeah, the CEO, who remains a mentor and who I think absolutely had another indelible impact on my career, was a guy named Mikey Drexler, who's widely considered to be the best merchant of his generation and multi-generations. Like, if Kelly Slater was still competing at 70, that's, Mickey, right? Still on his game. And he imparted upon all of us, one, customer is always right. You listen to them. We work for them. We work for their experience. We work for their joy. We work to exceed their expectations. And it's our job as merchants to anticipate what they are going to want or need. And in some cases, to push them aggressively with fashion. In other cases, to ensure that we have their basic commodities, khaki pants, denim shorts, a pocket t-shirt, a fleece hoodie. And then the way you could really press that is take risk with color, right? So stand for your basics, black, navy, heather gray. And then whatever's going on seasonally, really go for it with a strong point of view, with color, print, pattern. And so there was an intensity with Mickey. He didn't suffer fools, right? Way better to take the path of I don't know than push back with him and challenge his wizardry.
Because he'd eat you up.
Oh, God.
But you grew up with somebody just like that.
Yeah,
right?
which made it so for me.
This seems very familiar.
I mean, look,
this is like the dinner table with mom.
I remember my first. I think it was my first day. I was in. I mean, do you want to hear about my first day?
Sure, totally.
I mean, my first day was wild. It was Banana Republic. So I got hired by the Banana Republic division. Quite frankly, I could have been hired by the janitorial division. I would have been thrilled to just move out to California for Gap. So I get put in Banana Republic, which was going through a sea of change, right? So for those of us who don't remember, Banana Republic had this safari point of view, and there was the photojournalist vest, and it was this sort of classic colonial, neo-colonial apparel, right? And sort of like British aristocracy. but if you were living in South Africa or India. So we were changing that and making it more American, classic American style, and then eventually we sort of won the dress down, the Friday workwear vibe. But so I was in Banana Republic, and day one I was in what's called a merchandising meeting. So a merchandising meeting is when we, the merchants, would present to Mickey the product line for the respective season and go over how things were performing. So you're in a room of 40 people, and Mickey's sitting in the front row, and then a merchant goes up with their product line, they hang it on all of this grid, and then walk through their buying strategy. And I think the easiest way to describe what a merchant, in my opinion, is that you're a fund manager. Okay, so what I mean by that is you're investing in an assortment of styles, and you're looking at what is large cap, mid cap, small cap, and how you're going to apportion risk, right?
Yep.
And so that's what a merchant does. You've got an open to buy, and you are then deploying that as investment capital, and then you're looking to get the greatest return on investment, knowing that on small cap, maybe you don't invest as much, but it's a canary in the coal mine for what's coming down, and you can then bump up that trade in the future. So anyway, I was watching Mickey just consume people, and anyone that wasn't prepared or didn't have an aggressive point of view, Mickey would reward you for having a point of view, and Mickey would destroy you for not having a point of view. And then if you capitulated and you showed him your belly, you'd get eviscerated. And then, figuratively speaking, everything would just be, you'd be
Done.
bleeding out
Game
in the
over.
room, right? And everyone would be just squirming, going, I hope that doesn't happen to me. And so he's looking around the room, because Mickey always, the one thing that Mickey imparted on me, which is an intense level of curiosity. And so what he always impressed upon us was ask what people want. Don't be afraid to connect with what's going on in the store, right? There was no e-com back then. Talk to your sales associates, your store manager, grab customers and ask them, what are they excited about? That has a transformative or incremental impact on your business. So anyway, he would always reach out. Like, Mickey was both tough and humble in the sense that he would walk in and say, what's going on? Because he genuinely wanted to know, what are you seeing that he's not seeing? Recognizing that there was always like a gap in age, and he wanted to keep his finger on the trends of what was happening. And I thought that was just fantastic. His interest was real, right? He wasn't coming in and just being dismissively saying, what's up? He was like, what's up,
Yeah.
right? So he pointed to me and he said, hey, who are you? And I said, oh, it's my first day, I'm a trainee. And he said, well, Dan, why don't you come up here and rearrange this assortment, I don't know, for Brett, we'll say, whoever the guy was that just absolutely, his guts were out on the floor. And, thanks to Mom, I was like, well, F yeah, I'm going up there, and I'm going to show this whole room what's what and what the consumer really wants. And so I went up there and rearranged the wall, and I was probably grossly wrong on everything, but he appreciated that. And then,
because you did it with confidence and you got up there and you weren't afraid.
Yes, I think that's probably why he rewarded the fact that I took a stand. And then from that day forward, I had a really good, there's miles of distance between my role and Mickey's role, but I always felt like he was comfortable and took me under his wing.
Whew.
Yeah.
Wow. Let me ask you this. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. It's super formative to where we're going. I'm guessing that once Mickey got to know you personally as a mentor over time, he goes, oh, your mom's Ellen Levine, right? People would have known who your mom is.
No, weirdly, that actually happened later. So so where Mickey and my parents, because Mickey lived full time in San Francisco, and then later in his career, when he became CEO of J. Crew, he started spending more time in New York City, and then Mickey and my parents, their lives intersected.
Oh, no way.
Which was great, and I think my mom also had a good relationship with Mickey's wife, but there was that collision.
That's amazing.
But Yeah, so Mickey is just like he is apparel and consumer. Maybe he knew magazine just from buying ad space or something like that. But there was proximity or adjacency between what my mom was doing and what Mickey was doing.
I would imagine at that level they both were performing.
Yeah.
So could you have had a better first employer than Mikey Drexler?
No way. And I don't think it's. I don't necessarily say when people say it's lucky. I don't think things are lucky. I think your timing is just sort of serendipitous, right? So I happen to need a job and want to go into this career when Gap was just at the foothills of its meteoric growth in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And it just happened to be right timed, right? And by the way, I think if I'd taken a role at any of these places, they all had good runs in the 90s. Gap just happened to have the best run in the 90s.
And you got to be a part of it.
And I got to be a part of it. And I was with folks that were so smart.
Seasoned experts already.
Oh, my God, so smart. And I think from a work ethic perspective, like good or bad, I mean, you put hours in. You were working 70 hours plus a week there.
So I can't imagine. I'm like, what a great... Like, it's super interesting between the similarities between Mickey and your mom, the prep that your parents did for you unknowingly to you, but set you up for this trajectory to be there, and then the serendipitous timing to get there.
And I got to start surfing.
Yeah, and you got to start surfing.
Yeah.
Talk about that real quick, and we'll get back into career.
Oh, so let's be clear. I mean, I think it would be... I might have been overstating if I say I'm an average surfer, right? I very much like getting out there, but I think that I'm woefully mediocre at best. I'm wonderfully mediocre. But the surfing for me was, again, this goal. Like, this was like a long-standing goal of mine that I had to achieve. And so I taught myself first in Pacifica Beach in Northern California. And I think it's famous for that Taco Bell on the sand, which is probably the best location of any Taco Bell in the world. Right. And I bought a used board, an Infinity, that looked like a stick of fruit striped gum. And weirdly, one of my best friend's sons actually has it now, and I'm going to get it back from him. I'm getting back. I'm going to get it back. Yeah, it was, awesome. And it was an incredibly humbling experience teaching myself to surf. It was brutal. It is. I don't think it's a steep learning curve. I actually think it's a long learning curve.
It is, for sure.
And it never stops. I mean, the variables are profound. And then finally I started surfing, which for me was, I stood up on the board by myself, right? And then graduated. And eventually my friends and I, we would surf Ocean Beach in San Francisco.
Which is serious.
In the 90s. Yeah, again, I'm not good. But I paddled out, so I would defer to just tenacity and stubbornness to get to the outside, which, was also driven by fear of getting caught on the inside.
Yeah, for anybody's sake listening, Ocean Beach in San Francisco is a beach break, known for big waves, cold, heavy paddle out, legitimate surf. Like you're earning it. If you're surfing out there, you're in it.
There was days when if you got to the outer sandbar, I want to be just absolutely shelled and gassed. And maybe it was one wave, and then I'd be like, I can't go through this again. I got to take the next one in. But also the nice thing about the 90s is that it wasn't crowded out there. And I also didn't really sense localism, whether we would go out at Tarvel or Sloat or down at Kelly's. And I mean, maybe there was localism, but I happened to be with a good group and was also always minded myself out there. I think that's wise. Well, listen, it would be fun to dig into it, but I mean, you've been surfing ever since, and obviously it's brought you into your next steps in career, got you right into the heart of the surf industry at the very top levels. So let me do this real quick, just because you mentioned surf and sport, and then we're going to get full into career, but you've been a big cyclist. Yes.
For a very long time.
For a long time.
Talk about it, because you've done road, you've done gravel, you've done mountain, you've had a couple big accidents. Please don't repeat those.
I've had a lot of accidents. Yeah, the road is a little bit less kind than the ocean. But I started cycling in high school. I had a knee injury from lacrosse, and the rehab protocol was sure start cycling. And back in those days, first off, whether cycling being cool or not is like very polarizing, right? Because, you know, when we look on the roads here on Coast Highway in Southern California, you know, some people can be upset by cyclists, and cyclists can also not behave that well. And I've ridden, I've got a lot of road miles in, right? So I get all that. But back in the 80s, cycling along this State Route 9W in New Jersey, I would get M80s thrown at me. I would have bottles of beer thrown at me. Again, I'm by myself.
They
I didn't
really
have a team or anything. Yeah.
They don't like spandex back there, apparently.
It's like I was a big time contrarian back then, riding with a goofy helmet. And I would have pickup trucks, you know, cross over the median line. I mean, look, there are... there's country everywhere. There's New Jersey country, right? And so I would have New Jersey country come after me. I mean, it was never felt like my life was in danger, but I definitely felt threatened. But I grew an affinity for it because I think we're attracted. Like if something feels good, like, oh, I can go fast. I seem to be comfortable at this sport. And also cycling is about suffering. And I like that aspect of cycling, that the more time you put in and the more pain you absorb, the faster and harder you can go. So
you don't mind suffering a bit?
I don't mind suffering a bit.
But let's not crash anymore. Let's get the suffering in the saddle, not in the
you
pavement
know,
or the dirt.
I had to take a year off, I know. But
And
I'm
surgery,
back.
yeah.
I'm back, yeah. So,
Awesome. Well, listen, I know we totally segued, but it's a big part of your life, and I think it was important to touch on it because you've been a cyclist as long as I've known you.
like surfing, there's a meditative quality to cycling, particularly. You know, I've ridden so much in groups. I mostly ride by myself right now because I find it to be very meditative.
It's a very flow state sport, any
Yeah.
long endurance sport, and it's
Yeah.
not as pounding as running, but you can definitely find that flow.
Yeah.
And you like steep hills, like you like to go grind. Like I will definitely support the fact that you do like to torture yourself.
I do like that.
Yeah,
yes.
I know you do. You do. Okay, so let's go back into career because this is where it gets interesting because we talked about surf. We also, so you spent like 7 years-ish, I think, at Gap.
Yep.
During, as you said, like on this incredible trajectory, perfect timing, under this incredible tutelage and mentorship of this iconic, renowned businessman and mom.
Yep.
And dad. Where'd you go from there?
So, you know, the thing about all businesses is that at some point in time when you're flying high, gravity is going to grab you by the ankles. And I think that that's true of every great brand and great company. Like at a certain point, you hit a peak and then you might see the backside of the mountain and then find hopefully a trough that's higher, right? But Gap was going through a bumpy period in the late 90s, and I was also. So what I mean by that is that I realized that my love outside of work, my passion for being on the mountain, being on a bike, being in the ocean, was vectoring away from my peers and colleagues at Gap, who I had tremendous amount of respect for, right? And to this day, I remain friends with a fair bit of folks from Gap in that decade. And so going back to mom and dad and what they imparted on me, I created a list of outdoor industry brands. Back then, I really was like, I want to be mountain oriented. And so I identified 5 outdoor brands that I thought would be a great next step in my career and begin the process of interviewing with them and reaching out to them. And had the really, again, good timing of REI wanting someone to lead their private brand, which is anything you see with the REI logo in the store. And Kathleen and I are also looking to get back to the West Coast because we're living in New York City at that point in time. And so I started in REI. And that was incredible being up there. Very wet, but incredible.
Yeah. Where are they based?
They're based in Kent. Well, back then they were based in Kent, Washington. I think that they've moved. I don't know if they're in Bellevue, but I think that they moved north. But they had a renowned campus, which was basically like Valhalla for outdoor enthusiasts.
Rad. So
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, that, like the surf industry, everyone at REI had some direct or slightly indirect interest in the outdoors.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting how much more that's happened these days. So you mentioned you were in New York with Kathleen. So you met Kathleen at some point
In San Francisco.
And then Gap took you back to New York.
Yeah, so with Gap, Mickey believed in a separation in church and state with merchandising and design. And so we had the merchandising team, again, like what I would call the fund managers, and in San Francisco for all brands. And then the designers were in New York City. And so Gap's design offices were on 18th and 6th Avenue. And so there was an opening there. And I wanted to get a little bit closer to the creative process because I'd been on the business side for so long. And again, Gap, one of the things that I think separated Gap from a lot of companies, and I think that this is a hallmark of really, really good entities, is they supported lateral and vertical movement. And so they looked, and I think this was Mickey plus the senior leadership team, that if you can move your team and performers in your team into other roles, there's a return on investment down the line because they get more and more experience. And sometimes you don't want to do that because they could be having a really good run in their business for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. But it might be better from a succession planning perspective to say, hey, we're going to move this person into, we're going to get them out of their comfort zone. And so that way, when they do become a senior leader, they've experienced multiple roles. But anyway, yeah, New York City, then to Seattle.
Gotcha.
So we got closer. We got back to the West Coast.
Yeah.
Which was great. Yeah.
So listen, I'd love to, I could go down the road with every one of the businesses that you worked in because I'm sure they were all formative. We're going to go kind of quick through the next ones and just touch on them.
Through it, yeah.
But you've worked for some of my biggest idols. I mean, you go on to work at Hurley and at RVCA, and then you go to, I mean, Bob Hurley's one of my favorite guys. Pat Tenori lives a mile from here and went to high school with me. Incredible, visionary, iconic people. I always say, be like Bob. He's like one of my favorite humans. And you're in senior leadership at all of these. I think you're president at RVCA.
President RVCA, thanks to Pat Tenori. Yeah.
Amazing. Super cool. All that stuff. And then you keep going. I mean, the list is long. Two of the big ones, Skullcandy and then Stance.
Yep.
Like both during, again, meteoric rises. You've put yourself in positions with Gap and with all of these, I mean, really incredible timing and having the skill sets and they were looking for people to allow them to continue to scale, I would imagine. And they're like, tap on Dan Levine. Real quickly, talk through those experiences of those brands during those growth periods.
So with Skullcandy and Stance?
I think those are two of the big ones because you were there during these giant growth times.
So Skullcandy was relational. So I met Rick Alden, the founder of Skullcandy, via Jeff Curl, the chairman at the time. Jeff had grown up with my brother-in-law, Kathleen's sister's husband, so work that out.
Right.
And this was early days of collaborations, and Rick, like most founders, mercurial, visionary, wanted to do a collaboration with Skullcandy and Hurley. And so we met a couple times. And then I had just left Hurley to go to RVCA, and Jeff and Rick invited me to join the board of Skullcandy. And it was amazing. It just was incredible, right? So what they had hit on in terms of like scratching an itch, right? Saying, hey, colored headphones, because headphones are gray and black. It's like, wow. I mean, it wasn't rocket science, but all of a sudden there was this nascent demand, right? Or latent demand that they had hit on. And so they were growing at such a fast pace, I had the opportunity to come off the board and work full time at Skullcandy, which was a burden for the family because I was commuting for 4.5 years between Newport Beach and Park City. So I would leave every Sunday and I would come back every Thursday, for, I don't know, if it's not 40 weeks, it was 44 weeks out of the year. And so I was gone Sunday to Thursday, which definitely was tough on Kathleen, Luke, and Jake. And then Stance was sort of a branch off of the Skullcandy tree. Jeff Curl, again, chairman of Skullcandy, had a vision again for identifying a white space in the market, so specifically socks. And so I got to participate early on.
Sounds like this guy is a pretty visionary guy.
Jeff has really good vision. He's an entrepreneur's entrepreneur, and if he's not that, then he's also basically he's got a good binoculars for what's next, right? And so he hit on 2 consumer lifestyle moments. Yeah,
big
pop
bang,
culture.
right?
Yeah, big.
And similar, like a latent opportunity there in socks were black or white, and then all of a sudden Stance comes out 3 packs of mismatched crazy socks that that was every gift to every kid was wearing them. I was wearing them. I was buying them for my dad, like for a 4-year period.
So here's the crazy thing. The crazy thing is that Volcom could have had this business. Mm-hmm. They had sock puppets, if you remember.
I do.
And so that was a big time hot item with, basically I probably would say like 18 to 14-year-olds or something like that. Or it definitely was trending. Like they saw something with socks and taking a risk on socks, and they just didn't get behind it, which is actually what we saw, not necessarily with Volcom, but what we saw with all of the brands, is that socks were co-located in the brand section. But that's not how people buy socks. Socks they're usually a pickup item, right?
Fairly impulsive. Right?
And so we put it near the cash wrap, a lot like all the impulsive buys that you have with your customers. And once we started dropping in our racks right near the cash wrap, it was explosive.
Rocket ship.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And the margins the margins you guys operated on.
It's a really good margin business. Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
I'm pretty far away. I don't know what the margins are now. And obviously there's tariffs and, they're.
Well, and a lot of competition. But at the time you were the only brand doing that.
Only brand. Yeah.
For quite a while.
Yeah.
And the catch up period.
And when you are the only brand doing it, you better stomp on the accelerator and you got to get your elbows out.
Yeah.
You better be really pointy.
Yeah. And you were there for quite a while.
With both brands for a bit. Skullcandy we took public, which is not for the faint of heart.
Nope.
And then Stance, I was there for, 4 years, but also I was an investor and was an advisory board member, and got to see Jeff and John Wilson and Ryan and Taylor and Aaron grow that brand, and was able to at least weigh in while they were in there. They actually rented, or they were leasing part of the Skullcandy San Clemente office.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Downstairs. Yeah, they were in what we called the bunker.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting is, and this is going to pivot us to the next one. We could spend a long time because we can talk about how the surf industry and some of these brands we talked about don't exist in the way that they did. They were the apex, and it's just evaporated.
We could do a podcast on the surf industry.
We could, for sure.
Literally.
I know.
It's a red button issue for me.
Totally.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is, or what has been, is so many people have come out of surf and action sports and into brands that I carry in my stores. One in particular is Jeremy Andrus, ex-CEO of Skullcandy, that you worked very closely with, good friend of yours, who's the CEO of Traeger Grills. So and he brought the same mentality from the surf and outdoor action sports industry that you had with Skullcandy, et cetera, into the hardware world and with Traeger, and it changed for those of us dorks that are at ACE, and hardware conventions. The Traeger booth was like going to like Surf Expo or ASR. Like it was a very oh my God, these are my people. And he brought tons of people in from your world into my world, and now those people are all over the place. Like I have people calling on me all the time now that have come out of what used to be the surf industry. It's really interesting how it's changed, and it's been fun for us. And we carry a lot of these brands of people coming out of that space that have said, well, the surf industry has changed a lot, lack of a better term. Where else can we sell stuff?
Yeah.
And they come into our doors. It's been really fun for me, but Jeremy is one good example of that.
Jeremy's acquisition or his acquisition of Traeger was, it fell off that tree, right, in the sense that he saw the opportunity to reskin a category and take something that is overwhelmingly fun, grilling, and which is a social activity, and it deals with obviously deals with food and flavors and friends and family, and just amplified that, and no one else was approaching it. They were looking at it as a commodity business.
It was a blue chip.
Yeah, here's your boring grill. We know you're going to have fun with it, but we don't want to touch on your fun. We're just going to be in the background. And so he moved Traeger to the spotlight, which I think was a great move.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And there's been bumps in that one too. I think you made a statement earlier, like regardless in business or in life, like gravity's going to get you at some point.
You better have your umbrella.
You better have your umbrella.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's such a good statement for any kid to hear. Like,
Yeah.
it's not all up.
No, it's not all up. And you have to, it's not that the downs are joyful, but the downs are critical, right? Because you have to get through up and down cycles. If you're hiring, you want someone who's been through a down cycle. If someone's only been in brands that are go, 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 and you're doing a restructure, a remodel, you want someone that's experienced the grit of going through a downtrending business. It's just tough.
But everybody's been through it the longer you've been in the game. And so
the longer you've been
having
in the game,
people around you that
Yeah.
have been through it, because like my business partner, Matt, like when things get a little rough, like Matt's the most, like I go to him, how you feeling? He's like, oh dude, we're good. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. Like you need to have people in your court. But I think for young people coming out of school or looking at doing this, or young entrepreneurs, like some that you mentor and coach, like they need to know that it is, I don't care how great it is. I think you said it perfectly. Gravity will come to play at some point.
It will.
Right? Okay. So, and we've seen that with surf industry without going down that road.
Again, red button.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah.
I mean, just one thing about the surf industry. I was talking about this the other day. I won't. It's a rabbit hole that I think that's worth exploring, but I'm just going to leave it at this. When I didn't grow up in an Orange County beach town, and I'm incredibly jealous, and I think that anyone who grew up here, it's unique, right? It is unlike anywhere else. I'm sure Hawaii or Australia beach towns are really similar, but there was a thriving industry here. So if you were in high school, and then whether you chose to go to college or not, you could look to an industry as a career path. And I like that coming here in 2003 when Bob took a risk and hired me. I thought that was really cool to come to a region of the United States that had its own root system and was a path for young men and women to find a career in a really joyful category. And now it's going through such turmoil. The opportunity doesn't exist, and I think that's a gap right now. And I think that it's unfortunate that the young men and women that are growing up in North County, Orange County, and LA County towns that could have gone into one of the heritage brands aren't there. That being said, there's a tremendous opportunity now,
because somebody can crack that code.
It's probably not too dissimilar to the energy that existed when all of the heritage brands were coming up in the 70s and in the 80s. And then for Bob's sake and Ruka's sake, in the late 90s and early aughts. Again, I'll go back to the aughts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, right? And we're watching. If you're in the surf space, we're all talking about it. We're all seeing it because we're all experiencing it. As all these stores have been closing, the brands are blah blah blah. Someone's going to crack the code. You're already starting to see some start to show their faces, and it's exciting. But again, gravity hit the surf industry super duper hard.
It's like the Great Reset for the surf industry.
Let's hope. We want to see 2.0. But that brings us to your version of 2.0, which is the hat you're wearing, the shirt I'm wearing, and the company you're running. Let's talk about what got you into this business, and let's talk about what it does, who it serves, and why you're so excited about it.
Yeah, again, so serendipity and timing, right? So I was taking time off because as we talked earlier, I had two unexpected losses with my parents, and my brother and I were co-managing that. And so that gave me time to just not be in a go-go model again. And much to my chagrin, at first Kathleen loved that because I was around, and then that that certainly turned at a certain point. And she's like, okay,
Get out of the
You
house.
need to start doing something, which then flips to you're working too hard. But so, yeah, it was like, you need to find something. And I was looking, and there were really compelling opportunities, but nothing that really stood out. And I got a call from a banker, and I'll mention his name just because I had known Brian. It was Brian Rowe, and Brian reached out and said, hey, I heard that you and your brother do investing. And I said, yeah, we do. And he said, well, I have an opportunity. And I said, okay, well, what is it? And I think this ties into the V 2.0. So at the risk of being overly granular, I'll go into this just a little bit.
Yeah.
He said, family-owned business. And that for me is a green light, right? That is a well-run, operated, family-owned business just has characteristics that are incredibly unique. And I usually find that the infrastructure is strong. It's built on bedrock. Now, maybe the systems and the operational processes aren't the most modern, but you've got this really impenetrable foundation. So that's great. Then he said North County, San Diego. I was like, okay, awesome. Who doesn't love North County, San Diego? And he said it's in the apparel category. I said, great. And then he said this acronym with a number that was the switch for me. He said B2B. And I was like, okay, B2B is very compelling. And
Business to business.
Business to business is very compelling. There's a durability to it that's unique. And so he said the brand is called Original Watermen, and it's lifeguard uniform supply. And I just thought, one, how did this couple get the trademark
So
in
strong,
North County,
right?
Which we have, and it is incontestable, thanks to Ken and Jen Miller. Basically in the shadows of the surf industry. So they did, and they quietly set out building this lifeguard uniform business, and they were incredibly charming. They were ripped out of the pages of what, in my mind, a California couple was like back when I envisioned moving to California. They're older than you and me, but they have the physique and the energy of 30-something, and they're real water people. They are the real deal. And they'd built this outstanding culture. Now, we learned all of this during the
diligence
process. And so my partners and I have really wonderful partners in New York City, went through the slow and sometimes frustrating process of making the acquisition. And so we acquired the brand.
It's rad.
Yeah.
So you are vested in this thing.
So vested.
And you're operating as CEO. You're running the game. Is
I
that
am
right?
operating as CEO, which
You're
means that,
full-time,
as you know,
yeah.
full-time, 7 days a week.
Doing a commute, the whole thing. You're back in deep.
I'm back in deep. And
But talk about it. Talk about, you're in this new sphere. Like you were always serving retail water people, surfers, athletes, but it wasn't their main gig. You are now outfitting people that serve communities, protect communities, and save lives.
Yep.
Different?
It's incredibly different. Well, first off, we're supporting folks commercially, right? We're not a nonprofit. We're a for-profit business, and we're serving those that should be called first responders, and they're not.
There's a whole another podcast right there.
Big issue, another podcast, and I bet you a lot of people don't realize that open water lifeguards under federal law are not considered to be first responders, and we
Huge
all
travesty.
need to do a lot to make that change and help them get their first responder status. It's very different. It's incredibly different, and I don't mean it in a cheesy way, but running a great fashion lifestyle brand, there is purpose. There is purpose driven, but then running a company that outfits first responders and also the military and swim instructors, there's this pride that I think also Ken and Jen felt because they also were lifeguards. And it feels pretty awesome every day to think about making a shift better for a male and female lifeguard. And, can they turn 8 to 12 hour shifts and we don't want them thinking about what they're wearing. Right. And it feels really good. And everyone that we collaborate, whether you're a staff or team member of Waterman or you're an advisor, feels the same way. And so it's pretty cool. And it certainly feels wonderful.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I've loved watching you in the short amount of time you've been in there, less than 2 years.
Yeah, about a year and 4 months.
Yeah, and you've really inserted yourself. I think the company's always been, but let me back up. How many roughly lifeguards are you uniforming, outfitting annually? Do you know?
A lot.
A lot, I know. All the
so
states.
A lot, yeah. We're across all states. We think of it as we're a lower D Democratic organization. So I'm going to say that again, that's not tricky.
But explain what that means.
So what I mean by that is that we care about saltwater, freshwater, and chlorinated water lifeguards, swim instructors, and anyone who is a water person, right? So that's who we serve. And so we don't have a bias, right? We work for them. And the difference being is that we started as a saltwater beach lifeguard. So we always pull from there. And that is how we build our product for the toughest conditions, right? We got to partner, and we still do, with the HLA.
Hawaii Lifeguard
Association. I feel like they are the special operators of the global lifeguard profession. The conditions that they face, the training that they do, we work with them. We listen, and that's so. When I say that we want to make sure that no matter the community that you're serving, that you're not thinking about what you're wearing, because our product is so good that you don't have to think about it. And it's so durable.
It sounds like Mickey has had some influence over.
Mickey,
right?
Yes,
he's probably very proud of. What
he echoes back and forth in my head.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And what do you hope? Maybe what's next within Waterman? You clearly have listened, and you bought into and you continue the path that was created before. What else are you guys doing as a developer? Continue to invest in the brand.
Yeah, so there's a catchphrase that I think is of the zeitgeist right now called first principles. And so what I mean by that is basically ensure you're doing what your core mission is brilliantly and that you're best in class. So as that relates to your question, what we're doing is we need to make sure that every product that is branded Waterman is best in class for our female guards and for our men's guards. And so end to end. And we've got a lot of work to do on that. I think that we are best in class. Whether that meets my standards or not is open to question, because I push the team really, really hard, and our supply chain partners, and we've got product that's coming out that I think is simply, not a humble brag, it's best in class when you look at how well this product is built and how well it fits. We got to get that done, right? So that no matter the condition that a guard is facing, whether they're in the Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, Midwest, we're talking about sticky, hot, humid, or freezing, cold, and rainy and miserable. Are we addressing your needs when you are heading for your shift and when you're leaving your shift? So we got to get that done. Are we going to pull it into lifestyle? Probably. So
I wouldn't expect anything different.
Right,
from you.
but the other thing is that if you're doing something really well, you're likely going to win over adjacent fans, and that's true of any category. You can take the music category. Like if a band starts as indie hip hop or indie alternative or indie country, and they are just so good, and they're playing to a really small audience, the earliest of the adopters, and then they get the fast followers, but they're still true to a genre, and then they explode. Well, if they're really that good, they retain all their original early adopters, which for us is our lifeguards, right? So if we're really good at what we do, then we should have a more expansive cultural moment, right?
Yeah, I think that you said it really well. I think that analogy works. At the same time, you have tens of thousands of people wearing your clothing every day in all, warm water, cold water, different environments. I think at one point you told me it's like our goal is to outfit them from the time they wake up till the time they go to bed, including their shift and their personal life, so they don't have to think about it. So people are wearing your clothes all the time. So I'm like, if it's that well engineered, my suspicion is somebody like me would want to wear that as well.
Yeah,
it
of
makes
course.
perfect sense. Right?
We would be proud to have someone like you or the entire.
Well, hold on, I am wearing.
They are wearing
right
that, yeah. So and of course we want to get you. I think you have some of our sun protection stuff and one of our jackets, and so we want pride of ownership when you're wearing. And I think the other thing is like it's sort of like an if you know moment, right? Where if someone sees our very, I think, compelling logo, again, props to the Millers for creating a outstanding brand mark that's memorable, that we want it to move from an if you know to right? And just deliver great product.
Yeah, rad. Well, what's fun, I want to be clear, this isn't a marketing piece. It may sound like it, but what's more telling to me is I got a text from you or somebody you were with at a United States Lifeguard Association meeting. I don't know, I think you were in Hawaii, but it was my friends from Kauai, that are on.
Yeah, use your friends Kauai.
And I was like, hold on. I was trying hold on, Dan's in a picture with Kirsten and Kalani. I was like, how did this happen? So you've been already going down that road. I had nothing to do with it. And I wear the clothes because I like them, but it's been really fun for me to watch you in that space. And I can see from you, and this is really kind of the crux of it, and I think we'll probably put a pin in it here. It seems like it's more than just a lot of what you said. There's passion and purpose in the other brands, but this seems different just from what I've watched from the outside with you. Like, as you said it, like you're serving first responders. It seems like you've, not just from an owner operator perspective, but like from a genuine, this really matters.
It really matters. And I think just to market the role of lifeguard, right, as a career path, whether you're doing it seasonally or full-time, is who doesn't want that role, right? You're serving a community, you're taking care of a community, and it's incredibly aspirational. But what makes it also unusual is that it's reachable. It's not something that is so hard for anyone to do. You can go out and train and win that rollover. And there's something joyful about the lifeguarding profession, and that it really kind of just hits me that I love what they do. And then the other thing that's unique for us in our community is that our kids went through junior guards. Now, granted, my boys lasted a year.
Mine too.
So, but they went through junior guards, and we do support junior guards as well. And it is so formative for ocean safety and ocean confidence. And it's kind of a rite of passage out here, but it leaves this mark on the boys and girls that are participating in it, that I think makes them confident, that makes their parents feel good about what they're doing. They have a sense of accomplishment, and then it's also a feeder system into the program. Yeah. And all of this how can you not feel good going to bed and waking up in the morning knowing that you're working with these folks? So,
hallelujah.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. I just want to give you kudos, because it's been, like I said, it's been wonderful to watch not only what you're doing with the company, but how and who you're serving, and just your passion and purpose for this world. And neither of us are lifeguards, but we're my role with the Ben Carlson Foundation, and we support all the junior guard programs with our roundups in California and in Hawaii. Like, I'm so passionate about the group. They are the most humble, impressive humans. All they want to do is help and save lives. That's it. And it's our job as a community to support those folks. That's what you're doing. yes, you're not a nonprofit, but you're providing the best goods for them so they can do their job. And then there's folks like me and so many others that are trying to support them in different grassroots ways. So it's just cool that we've been able to kind of come together in different ways to do this.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a ton of fun, right? To be able to
is,
collaborate on all this, and then also get to see the training that they subscribe to on a annual or biannual or quarterly business. Like these folks are always staying up and sharing the latest techniques to ensure again that the community is kept safe.
Yeah. Well, listen, if anybody wants more information about exactly what you're talking about, there's a great podcast called The Lifeguard Project.
Oh, right. That was a great one.
With Drosko.
Yep.
Drosko was here on the podcast. He's incredible. He talks all about the importance of guarding what they go through. It's really an incredible podcast and media series. And then, Dan, if somebody wants to find out more about Waterman or about you, what's the best way?
Well, I guess the best way to find out about Waterman is, I guess you could reach out to me directly. Or
LinkedIn.
Or LinkedIn, yeah. I mean, anyone could ping me on LinkedIn. Please check out our website, which we recently relaunched. I think there's some good stories in there. But you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can DM us on our Instagram channel where we celebrate lifeguards from around the U.S., with all the organic content, really trying to elevate the profession.
What's that address on Insta?
Oh, Original Waterman on Insta, yeah. Okay. So
and website?
Website, watermanbrand.com.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Dan, we could truly go all day. We are out of time.
We do need to do one on the surf industry.
Let's do it.
So
we could bring in some of our other friends that might be
I think that would be like a multiple. Yeah, that would be, you'd have a lot of heads of state in here talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. But listen, what you're doing, how you done it, thank you for sharing the story. There was, again, I always like to say, or I hope that people that know you really well learned something or found out something. Like I found out a bunch of stuff. I've known you for a long time and I did not know the whole backstory. So thank you for sharing your story. Super cool what you've done, how you've done it, and I love what you're doing with Waterman.
No, thanks for the invite. This was a great pleasure. So
cool.
Awesome,
Dan,
Mark. Yeah,
thanks
man.
Appreciate it.
Later.